Hi everyone, my name is Damian Bloomfield, and welcome to today's conversation with Grammy Award winning producer and composer Keith Thomas. Keith has produced a myriad of hits across multiple genres in his 4 decade long career. Sit back and enjoy the conversation.
Hi, Keith. How are you?
I'm great, buddy. How are you?
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do the interview with me and for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Absolutely.
So how have you been over the pandemic and over this year?
It's funny. I tell everybody, this is what I've trained for. I've been in the studio like this for 4 decades. You know, you hide out in the studio and that's kind of where I live. So it's not much different for me, I will say. We've been blessed, though, that we have not been sick, and fortunately don't know anyone that has. And so I'm just, I'm praying for those that have been ill and ready for this to be over.
Absolutely. I've seen on Instagram that you've done some sessions with masks. So
right.
You've been complying.
Yeah, I managed Layla Tucker, who is Tanya Tucker's daughter. We just did her first debut album, and we recorded at Blackbird Studios, and we had to wear masks. All the players had to wear masks as part of their policy there, which was interesting, you know. Never done that before.
Right. Well, it's good as a producer and as a writer that even in these lean times, then you've still got work and you've still got revenue. So that's something to be thankful for, right? Yeah.
Yeah, some revenue.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's not anything like it used to be in the crazy 90s, right? It's like, I always say, there's no mailbox money anymore.
Right. Well, we're going to get into some of those hits from the 90s, but let's take it all the way back. So born and raised in the suburb of Conyers, Georgia, and your father was a minister and a musician. So let's take it from there then.
Okay.
What were you listening to on the radio? What was your, I know that he only allowed, it was just gospel music in the house. So
Yep. Yeah, my dad was a hillbilly musician, and we have two families by the same parents, basically. But my first my brothers were like there's 22 years difference or 23 years difference between my youngest brother and me, right. So they had quite a span there, and but by the time we came along, my sister and I, my dad had become a Christian and a minister, and started attending this church. And so I grew up in the church where he was minister of music, and he was also a preacher as well. But I was in church every Wednesday, Sunday, and I grew up there. My dad played with the Sons of the Pioneers, a lot of hillbilly groups back in the day. So I grew up on all that. We were only allowed to listen to country music and gospel music in the house. You could hear beer drinking songs all day long, but you couldn't listen to pop music. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I started sneaking things in, and back then, of course, it was vinyl. And so I remember listening to getting into trouble for sneaking in the Carpenters record into the house.
Right.
So that's how drastic it was. But, I kind of rebelled a little later as well. I started listening to R&B music, like the Stylistics and the OJs and Quincy Jones and all. I started just, that's where I really got what I consider the R&B chops that I've loved so much about the urban side of things. It's just that's what I listen to, right? But my dad's dream and goal, and it's funny that we were having this morning. The person that actually moved me to Nashville was just at my studio a few minutes ago, Rob Galbraith, who works for Ronnie Milsap, or works with Ronnie. He's been with Ronnie all this time. We were just talking about the story. I wrote two songs actually, that I thought sounded like Ronnie Milsap. And so I made a little cassette on my friend of Rhodes and sent it off to him, and totally forgot about it. But the story behind that, let me just say this. Ronnie was touring at the time, and he was in Atlanta touring at he was at one of the venues downtown, and I picked up the phone and called the venue, and I don't even know how this happened. I was able to speak to Ronnie's brother-in-law. That would never happen today. And I go, I'm a songwriter. And he says, you need to contact Rob Galbraith at Ronnie Milsap's in Nashville and send him these songs. So I did. So I sent him the song, and about 3 months later, I'd totally forgotten about it. I'm having dinner with mom and dad at their house, and I get a call from Rob, and he said, and I'd signed it Brian Keith Thomas, and he said, "Hey, Brian, this is Rob from Ronnie Milsap." He said, "I threw your cassette in the trash, but something made me take it out, and I listened to it, and I love these songs. I want you to come to Nashville and do the demos." And I said, "I'm there." So that weekend I went to Nashville, and while I was there doing the demos, he asked me, "Would you be our first staff writer?" So I moved to Nashville to write for Ronnie for, I think it was a few years that I was there, but that's what got me to Nashville.
Okay, so two questions there. Were you a self-taught musician by ear? Did you have any training of sorts? And were the songs love songs, or what was the content of the?
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, I'm self-taught. I still don't read to this day, which is frustrating to sometimes because, like, for instance, I love scoring film. I love orchestral music. But the way I have to do it now is I have to, and unfortunately we can do it with computers these days. I have all the software that allows you to actually do the parts, and then I have someone else transcribe it for me. But yeah, I started playing, guitar. I'm 6 or 7 years old. I was telling them, my dad used to put his guitar in the chair at church, and I was so big I couldn't hold it, so I'd stand up and play just the neck, in church and sing. And then I started playing piano when I was about 16, I think it was. And look, I would play 8 hours a day, and that's not an exaggeration. I have a vivid memory of my mom bringing a plate of fried chicken and laying it on top of the piano and walking out, But my dad also, I mean, we were poor. I mean, it's like I was telling these friends earlier this morning that I didn't have an inside bathroom until I was 13, And so for my dad to be able to afford a piano, and then he bought me a 4-track recorder, I would live in my bedroom and I would do one vocal, and then I'd play guitar, and then I'd mix that down to another track. And then, I just started building all these multi-tracks back then. And that's kind of where I began the production process, and learning stuff. But, and the songs that I wrote for Ronnie, they were love songs. It was Beautiful Thing and Still in Love with You were the two titles of those songs. But, that I had started writing a couple of years before that. I traveled with the Sherritt Brothers, which was the gospel group that was on Word Records. I traveled with them for about 3 years. That's where I wrote my first song, and that was Song for the Heart, and that was the title of their album on Word, which was crazy the way that all worked out. But yeah, so he moved me to Nashville, and I wrote for him, like I said, a couple of years. And one of the things that I will never forget, and the thing I love about Ronnie Milsap is that he gave me a studio, and they both gave me the studio to use while Ronnie was on the road. I'd had full access to their engineer, the studio, which was a state-of-the-art studio, but I'd stay in there 12, 14 hours a day learning to produce, and that's where I learned at Ronnie's studio.
Interesting. There is, because I was brought up in church and Pentecostal church, and there is that relationship, even though you're not allowed gospel in the house, there is the relationship between country and gospel. So people like Mary John Wilkins recorded gospel cuts. So did Jim Reeves, Johnny Cash, the Oak Ridge Boys, Chuck Wagon Gang. And so
yep.
There is kind of that, Elvis and Dolly Parton. So it's kind of like I think the serenity of country wasn't. It wasn't kind of seen as raunchy per se. So
right. Or to go one step further, devil music. It wasn't considered devil music.
Yeah, exactly. So when Ronnie moved you to Nashville, is this like late 70s or
79? Yeah,
right. Okay.
1979.
Yeah.
And then I think I went over to Word Records in 81, maybe. And I wrote for Word for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I was blessed. I had, I think, 21 number ones while I was there at Word. And then I decided that it was time to move out on my own. And I knew that I was leaving Word. So my last solo album, which was Kaleidoscope on Word, I intentionally did some vocals on there, guest vocal appearances. And I had Bebe Winans, Greg Guidry, and Donald McElroy, because I was going to try to get them all three a deal. And it worked out for Bebe because that song became actually he ended up winning best R&B vocal performance off of that record, and so that was helpful in getting his deal.
Yeah, that was It's Only Natural.
It's Only Natural, right?
Second track Yeah, that's right. And then he on the side two, he did a second track, Arms of Love.
Right, exactly.
And
wow, you do know my discography. Well, that's crazy.
And Donna McElroy, she obviously did backgrounds for Amy Grant, and then
right.
4 years later, she was signed to Reprise Records and did A Different World,
right,
Bigger World album. Sorry.
What a talent! What a singer she is! I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, she went on to teach after that. So
yeah, she's in Chicago teaching now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's kind of come back to '79. That was kind of fortuitous because at that time, Word was still in Waco, Texas, right? So
correct.
The whole Nashville becoming the epicenter of Christian music hadn't even started yet. So you were kind of well placed, right?
Yes. Yeah. That was before all of that. Before Amy really took off. You know, as a matter of fact, I was offered. I actually was offered a spot in front of Ronnie Milsap to open for him 20 minutes if I'd go be his MD. And my wife and I just had a baby, and I didn't want to leave her alone. Same thing for Amy. They offered me a spot in front of her if I would go on the road and be the MD, and I could open with 20 minutes before her show. And you often go back and you think about those things, like what if I'd done that, as an artist instead of a producer? But I just can't go back and spend too much time thinking about that because I'm blessed. God's been good to me, and it's just the way it worked out. So
the staff writing at Word, were you a contemporary Christian writer?
Yeah, I was a CCM writer, staff writer and producer there. And I produced Carmen, the Gaithers. Yeah. There's a ton of other artists there that were on the label at the time.
This was early 80s, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think it was 86 that I left Word for my own company, Yellow Elephant Music at the time. And with that, I tried to, I had met Bebe at PTL, and that's where I got him to do the song on the album. And then I remember shopping that song quite a bit, and no one really got it, except Bill Hearn. And then Bill Hearn, after you heard it, flew Bebe out and CeCe out, and within weeks they were signed. And then we did the deal with Capitol as well. Right. And I have to give Bebe credit because when they signed to Capitol, they wanted an urban guy or a black guy to produce the record, and Bebe said no. If Keith doesn't do it, we're not doing it. And so that was a point for me. And and what I don't know, I think they got 10 to 15 Grammys between the two of them now. So it worked out, And they're amazing people and amazing talent. So, I'm just blessed to have been a part of that.
We're just kind of going backwards and forwards because some of the stuff I was going to say, you've just you've just really gone, you basically come out with all of my, all of the things I remembered. So one question I had was Yellow Elephant. Where did Yellow Elephant come from then? That always intrigued me.
It's like I said a while back, I need to come up with a really cool story about me hunting in Africa or something when I saw a yellow elephant. I don't know. It's as simple as this. I was starting a production company, and Brett, my assistant at the time, I said, can you make a list of some cool names and stuff that you think would be a cool production company? So on that list, it was Yellow Elephant Music. It was about maybe 15 or 16 down on the list. I go, I like that. So that became it. And I have a thing for elephants. I don't know what it is about elephants, but I just love them. So I go, that's cool. And then, that's what it became. I still have the sign up in my kitchen,
Brett Perry was your assistant, right?
Exactly.
And your son at the time was Jeremy, right?
Jeremy, my youngest boy, yes. And then Keegan came along.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So interestingly enough, even when I'm thinking about the Word days, when you said you were a staff writer, you had people before you like Kurt Kaiser and even Ralph Carmichael at Light Records. He came from doing Nat King Cole and I Love Lucy. And he was, in the 60s, he was trying to try to make Christian music more contemporary and that kind of thing. And you did that again. So you were the catalyst for doing that, that second wave of contemporary Christian, really. So, that much queued up.
For me, Bebe was so afraid he was going to get kicked out of the church because of what we were doing. I remember having that conversation with him many times because basically I was listening to Quincy Jones and David Foster over here and trying to apply that to Christian music. And you know, that's kind of where I was living musically. And it was like, when I heard Bebe sing, it was like butter, you know, and I go, you need to be doing this. We just need a platform for you to be able to do this on a bigger stage. And so you know, my plan was to get them to a place where people would accept that so that they could be, you know, have a bigger stage, have a bigger platform.
Yeah. But then a lot of people don't know before that, 1983 was your first album on Mer Records, Instrumental Appetite. So
cool, yes.
And that was kind of, there's some complex things in there because I know you've, I spoke to you on the phone before and you mentioned about Jeff Lober, you know, you knew about a lot of these kind of guys. So you
right.
were, you know, you were actually, I was listening to it earlier today, some heavy, I've got the vinyl here, some heavy stuff, some, you know, deep chords and arrangements and all that, you know, you were up. And then the Mighty Clouds of Joy, one of the lead singers, Paul Beasley, his solo album, My Soul Is Free. I remember you playing keyboards on that, acoustic piano and synthesizer. And you also wrote a couple of the tracks there. Sure Enough, you wrote with Neal Joseph and Love Has Taken It All Away. So
wow.
Neal Joseph produced that album. So was he like a sort of a mentor to you, Neal Joseph?
He was, and ended up becoming one of my closest friends. Yeah, Neal gave me my first production job at Word. It was Steve Camp, actually.
I read that.
Yeah, Steve Camp, he said, I've got this guy and I'd love for you to, you know, it's his third album and we'd love to see, you know, what you could do with him. You know, at the time they weren't sure if he was going to make it on the label, stay on the label. And that kind of became a theme for me. It's like I'd get called in at the last minute if somebody was going to get dropped, they would call me in. But anyway, it worked. I mean, that album, For Every Man, that album was #1 for 6 months. And so that was amazing. And then he gave me another project, Kenny Marks, and they were doing a sampler album. And so they're going to put like 4 or 5 artists on an album. Whoever got the best response would get the album deal. And Kenny got the best response. And we ended up making 2 or 3 records on Kenny as well. Mm-hmm. But Neal became my champion. He was integral in me becoming a producer that you know, people would, I don't know, we became friends. And then it ended up being that he and Dennis Worley, who was my publisher at Word, and Jimmy Slose, who was a bass player, a friend of mine, we all ended up in the same neighborhood. And we decided at the time that we would buy a lawnmower together and share it. And the deal was whoever left the neighborhood last was the one that got to keep the lawnmower. And so Jimmy Slose keep the lawnmower because we all moved out before he did. Yeah. But Neal lived right down. He lived on the corner right down the street. Dennis lived about 3 houses down, and then Jimmy lived right next to me. So it was a community there for a while. And then I don't know if you know who Dick and Mel Tunney are. Mel was part of First Call. She was one of the singers in First Call. Okay. And Dick used to play piano for the Imperials. They also moved into the neighborhood. So there were 4 or 5 of us in the neighborhood at one time or another. And so that was a cool experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jimmy Lee played bass for the Imperials, but also what blew me away as a young bass player coming up was when he did Call Me on Bebe CeCe's second album, well, the first album for Sparrow. And then I know later on he's gone on to produce Kerry Underwood and stuff. But yeah, I mean, he was a killer bass player.
No kidding, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I just worked with him on Layla Tucker's project a few weeks ago, and it was like a trip down memory lane, some of the things that we had done together. But one of my things I remember about Jimmy the most is that he would have his bass in the back of the truck, uncovered, just on a blanket, and he'd boil the strings the night before. But it was like there was no case. He just pick it up and play it. You know, it was just the weirdest thing. But yeah, he played on so many records back in the day. I can't name them all. You know, but definitely one of my favorite bass players. He and Tommy Sims too are. You know, I have fond memories of both of those guys in the studio.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly enough, I'll throw this in there, and you have a cool story I know from Vanessa Williams, but I'll let you tell that in a bit, and then we'll go back. a lot of people, when they heard those albums, like the Heaven album and the eponymous self-titled album, they were wondering if you guys were black. Because yeah, I mean, I knew when I read the credits and I saw the name like Mike Rhapsody and Billy Sprague and Brett Perry, I had a feeling you guys were white. But some people were like, wow, when you hear the grooves, these must be black guys.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, for so long, everybody thought I was black. So my first meeting with Vanessa Williams in New York, when I went to meet with her about the Save the Best for Last record, she didn't say, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you or anything. Her first thing out of her mouth was, you're white. And that was it. And the room, we erupted in laughter because she thought I was black. Somebody told her that I was a black guy, that I looked like Mike Tyson. And, so we had good laughs about that. But a lot of people did think that, and still some people still do, they listen to the music first and then they go, is this a white guy or a black guy?
And that reminds me of, so if you probably, the Sean LaBelle.
Yes.
Sean LaBelle. Because he's a bass player as well, and he was coming out with some grooves in the 90s, and it kind of reminded me of you because later on I found out that he was white.
Interesting.
Yeah, he worked with Everett Harp and Nikita Germain and those guys. The thing is, though, you were one of those producers. When you take someone like Brown Bannister, I remember when Brown Bannister was playing bells on the Imperial's Sail On album. That was a Chris Christian production.
Right.
Well, you were like the kind of producer, and nothing against Brown because he's worked with Shane Keister, and I know you played on the Browns
projects, right?
Productions, but you were you represented a producer that, because I remember speaking to Brown and he said he's more like a casting director, but you're actually a producer that actually played. So you could, and I know you used Mark Hammond to do drum programming later on, but you did it all. You could play, write, program. So it's kind of like more of the playing producer.
Right. Well, I did, and that's still today. I'm a programmer, I'm a player, and I come in from, and I end up playing sometimes guitar, bass on the stuff that I'm working on now. But back in the day, I felt like I had to, and Brown, he is a casting director, but he's a great producer. I spent a lot of hours with him in the studio. I've seen the sun come up with him many times because he's anal. And I learned a lot of that from him. It's like, just the way he produced vocals and he was very smart about it. But I remember working on David Meece's record with him. It's when I had the Synclavier. We were at some studio. I can't remember the studio now. But it was like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I passed out on the sofa. I mean, I was so tired. We had been doing it all day long. And but though I had many sessions like that. Anybody that's worked with Brown has that same story, because it's just relentless, and his energy level back then was like crazy. But and then but I programmed some stuff for him, and then on the stuff that I produced myself, I love having my hand in everything, and to the point that if it needs somebody to come in and do something, like Mark, who's brilliant and a great programmer and producer himself. He was with me at the Bennett house. He was actually on staff there for a while, and we are, best of friends, obviously. But we work so well together. And it's one of those things like working with Billy Whittington, my engineer. Yeah. Billy and I can work in the studio. We don't have to say one word to each other. We know exactly what's coming next or how to communicate that way. Same thing with Mark. Mark and I, we have the same sensibilities. It's just bizarre how our brains work together on that stuff. And, from everything from Selena to Amy to Luther, I mean, it's just all that stuff he did with me. And I with both of those guys, I would be nowhere,
Yeah. I know you had your little syndicate later on, which was, after Jeff Balding, it was Billy Whittington,
yep.
Tom Envy on guitar, yourself, Mark Hammond, and Sean Shankle, production coordinator. You had your kind of little syndicate. But if anybody wants to hear that, you're talking about your R&B feel. That Paul Beasley record, the piano on that, and that was really those were the days when but if they heard that, they probably would have thought you were black in those days. That to this day, I really, I mean, did you ever keep in touch with, those guys?
Well, I mean, with Mark, you mean, these other guys?
I mean, like, you were on a Paul, you're on Paul's record, and there was a friend of mine that sang backgrounds on there, David Baroni.
Of course, yeah, I know David. Yes, yeah. I haven't talked to any of those guys in forever. It's kind of as the music business changed and everybody started wherever our little silos now. We're all in our own little studios. It's like you could go back in the day. You would go to a place, even to the Bennett House when I owned the Bennett House. It was a great place where, there's a lot of synergy there. I had 2 rooms, and there was always somebody there that you hadn't seen in a while. So you were always talking and seeing people. But since now we all have home studios, it's a little bit different environment. So, I don't get to see those guys as often. It's on us to be able to keep up with that. So I should probably have a big old party somewhere and have a reunion, because it's been a while.
Yeah. So Bebe and CeCe hit in 87, 88. Then 1991. What happened was, I know on Lead Me On, Amy Grant's Lead Me On, you were playing the last track, I think it's Say It Once More, you were playing Synclavier on that. And then 1991, you end up producing Amy Grant, which was interesting because it was that crossover writing that you were doing, the same sort of thing that you were doing with Bebe. What kind of I didn't like was the fact that people categorize Bebe and CeCe as contemporary gospel or gospel.
I lost you there, buddy.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I got you now. Yeah, you're back. Yeah, it's a little jittery, but I got you.
Which bit have you missed?
I lost you when you said they categorized Bebe and CeCe as gospel, and then you cut out.
Yeah. So like you'd have Bebe and CeCe as contemporary gospel, right?
Right.
And then you'd have Amy Grant as contemporary Christian. And I looked at that and said, hold on, just because these 2 people are black, right? They're actually got the same producer, it's the same writing, okay? It's the same genre of music, right? So essentially, Bebe and CeCe are contemporary Christian,
Right.
So and that's what I liked about the just the output that you were putting. In some way, it was kind of it was across. I can't, categories are not a good thing in music, and I know there are for sales and all that kind of thing. But it was you were producing contemporary Christian with black artists, and we hear the arguments are coming back again now, where people are saying CCM shouldn't be white and gospel shouldn't be black. Well, I mean, you kind of went across all of that whole thing. You were just producing good music.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's one of my beefs is as they want to put you in boxes. And I understand that to a certain degree. At the same time, you eliminate the audience. It's like the Bebe and CeCe's audience was, to me, in my mind, was always much bigger than just the gospel market, So, and the same for Amy, it's like, I think I appreciate what you said about just producing great music, or it was like, that was the goal. And let the people make the decision. We don't put them in a box over here because it's gospel, because that has a connotation to it, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But some people may not listen to it because it has that label on it, But and it worked, Look, they ended up getting on R&B charts, and it worked for them. So I was really pleased about how all that played out. Yeah.
So the Capitol connection, how did that come about? Because so Capitol wanted to distribute. Well, it was a dual distribution. So how did Capitol come about? How did they hear about the project and want to sign Bebe CeCe as well?
Well, that came through Sparrow. Sparrow had done some sort of deal with Capitol at the time, and that was a partnership that they had developed, and they ended up getting signed to Capitol as well. And so they did handle the pop side of things, or R&B side of things, for them at the time. Yeah,
because I noticed the players on the Heaven album. You had Ira Seigel, Paul Jackson Jr., Jeremy Lubbock was doing the strings. And then you start using, studios like the Hit Factory and Yes, Gerald Albright, saxophone. So what happened then was, I'm sure it was catching the ear, being on Capitol, it was catching the ear of, I guess, people like Vanessa Williams and those guys. So did that, and then with Amy Grant in 1991. So because she was dual as well, because she was on A&M and she was on the Myrrh.
Right.
So, is that when the secular guys started calling? Is that when?
Yeah, they called after when Bebe CeCe's album came out. Ed Eckstein from Mercury called me to do Vanessa Williams as a direct result of the Bebe and CeCe album. And it's funny, I wrote 8 songs for Vanessa and went to New York to meet with her about that, and it's he said, we love all these. We'd like for Cynthia Weil to write the lyrics. And I go, okay. I didn't know who Cynthia Weil was. And I was like, he said, I'm gonna send you her discography. I said, okay. So by the time I got back to my hotel, he had sent the discography over, and I was so embarrassed, like hit after hit after hit after hit, and I'm going, oh gosh. And so then I get home and I give her a call, and we had such a great conversation. The first conversation, she, like many people, would say, so who's on your wish list? Who do you want to produce? And I said, first thing out of the gate was James Ingram. She said, oh, honey, he's a friend of mine. I'll have him give you a call. And I'm going, okay, you're right. Sure enough, that same day he calls me, he leaves a message on my phone. I had to call her back and play the message. I say, wait a minute, is this what he sounds like? And she said, yes, that's James. And so then I got to work with James. And that was, like, to me, one of the highlights of my career. It's one of those things where he was one of my early guys, the mentors that I would look at and think, oh my God, this guy's one of the greatest voices of all time. And because a lot of the stuff that I had patterned for Bebe was based on James Ingram.
Wow.
And so getting to meet him and work on that Warner Brothers record was like, it was like a dream came true all of a sudden. And then we became friends, and we became really good friends, to the point that, look, I've taken a bullet for that man. I love him. Mm-hmm. And so just the way some of these things work together, you can't write this stuff. It just happens, and I'm blessed,
I did read that story about Cynthia Weil. She wrote "Just for Tonight" with you on.
Yes. Yeah, but look, it's like it's going back to the black thing, because a lot of people did think I was black, but the Bebe and CeCe project itself was so credible in some of the urban minds that I will tell you a story. I was on the Grammy Urban Committee for several years, maybe 5 or 6 years or whatever. I was the only white guy on the committee. So we're the last time I was out, we're sitting in this huge room, with this long table, and there's probably 30 of us in there, I guess. And I'm sitting right next to Philip Bailey, and there's some other greats in the room. Yeah. And so the idea was everybody had to go. Well, actually, one of the things is people would come in, and I would be the only white guy in the room, and you could tell they were going, "Are you sure he's in the right room?" And so the deal is, you go around the table, and everybody stands up and mentions your name, and tell them who you introduce yourself, rather. And I stood up and said, "Hi, my name's Keith Thomas." And immediately the guy directly in front of me got on his knees, and he said, "Oh my God, he did the Bebe and CeCe Winans stuff," And it was like, that was so, everybody just erupted in laughter, but it was so amazing to see the respect there, and the same thing happened again at lunch. Somebody else did the same exact thing. And I just go, I'm proud of those records, because we went out of the box with them, did something that wasn't popular at the time, but it worked. And that's just part of the whole story that I love, is that, when we went and did what we loved, it worked,
Well, the thing is, again, I'm going to jump forward because Alan and Marilyn Bergman wrote "Always You" on James Ingram, so they're another pair.
Yeah.
Because I feel you, because I was brought up in gospel, so some of these great writers, you wouldn't have known about them unless you have someone like a Bill Maxwell or someone like yourself who would produce on that ilk, on that level. And they would introduce certain people, and then you'd be like, oh, so that name, belongs to that name, So
Right.
Going backwards to the Bebe and CeCe stuff, I remember when I first heard "No Hiding Place," and it sounded like Pink Cadillac from Natalie Cole, and because the way how you would use certain percussive sounds, so you hear some random pan coming in from the the right side and something coming from that's just, it's just a piece of percussion. I think when it was in the Kaleidoscope album, that's when you started experimenting with those kind of, and so your musical mind, it kind of, it was out there, but then you probably hear like a triangle or a broken glassware, and you're like, oh, is that outside, or is that because the creativity was so there. Having said that, now that album is as red as teeth. I found the album. I found a CD of Kaleidoscope. Must have been 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I saw it on the internet for $125.
I saw that too. I did see that. Yeah, I think I have a screen cap of that somewhere. That was, I could have just saved them. I've got plenty upstairs.
Yeah. Well, I've got it on vinyl and on CD. So. Oh
wow, interesting. That's funny. Yeah. Wow.
Well, like you were saying about James, 1993. I mean that when you acquired the Bennett house, 1991.
Oh, you froze up again there, buddy.
So 1991, the Bennett house, and then 1992, Trey Lorenz. That's another great artist. The backing vocalist for Mariah Carey. You did 2 tracks on, Run Back to Me and Baby I'm a Heaven. So you were kind of on a roll, and again, he was signed to Epic, right? So I know you did some work with.
He was Mariah Carey's background singer.
Yeah, that's right. So. And in fact, Bebe Winans was on the last track on that album. Yeah. So what I was saying was there some sort of relationship with Tommy Mottola then? Because he started, after you did a lot of Columbia artists, Trey Lorenz, and then he got you to do Charlotte Church.
Well, I was as a staff writer and a producer. I was a writer for Sony for about 10 years, and then I signed a deal with Tommy, I think it was 98. So I was on staff there. And so I did get quite a few Sony artists at the time. The Charlotte Church record came about, David Sonnenberg was my manager up till, I don't even know what year it was, but the Charlotte Church record came through Irving Azoff, because Irving managed me for a short period of time. And that was the first record Irving gave me when he started managing me.
Peebo Bryson was 94. So yeah, there was a few Columbia Epic artists, Sony artists around that time.
Yeah, like I said, I was signed. Actually, I think Charlotte Church was 2003, 2002, 2003, something like that. But anyway, I was signed as a staff writer and producer at Sony, and Tommy signed me there. And it was funny because I was promised Mariah and Celine, and then look, it all worked out. I worked with Barbra Streisand and Michael Bolton, and several other artists that they were developing at the time. So it all worked out great. But I was there for about 3 years as a staff producer.
Right. So that would explain where the Sony artists would come from.
Exactly. Yeah. But I was a Sony writer from all throughout the 90s. I was a Sony writer.
Yeah, that's right. Because I remember when you were writing with Amy on the Behind the Eyes album in 1997, I would see through the courtesy of Sony Tunes. So that kind of made me think that way. So, and we've missed out a whole raft of people, because 1991 or 1990, you did you won that contemporary hit radio in Japan #1 spot for Whitney Houston for Taking a Chance on the I'm Your Baby Tonight album. That came out on the Japanese release, but not on, and that was a Sanyo commercial in the works. So
wow, buddy. I need to get with you because you know more about my career than I do. I totally forgot about that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was I can't remember the name of the song now. Hold Up the Light, maybe?
Taking a Chance. Taking a Chance.
Taking a Chance. Okay. Taking a Chance. That's right. And then Hold Up the Light was
the first time
is the next one.
Hold Up the Light was the first time you worked with Whitney on the Heaven album. Yeah.
That's right.
1988. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, I have a funny story about that project. I had hired John Patoker, who was one of the like top engineers back in the time, you know, and he was incredibly expensive per day.
Wow.
And we were scheduled to do vocals on a Thursday at one of the studios in Nashville. And so we're in town, we're getting set up, we're ready to go. And no Bebe and CeCe and Whitney. Come Friday, no, they still hadn't shown up. Like Saturday, someone called me and said, hey, I saw Bebe and Whitney over at Houston's restaurant. So I jumped in my car and I go over there. Sure enough, they're sitting there eating. I go, you guys bother to call, you know, to let us know you're not coming? And it was kind of a funny moment. But the fact I had been waiting on them in the studio for 2 days. But, you know, we get in the studio and I do my normal thing. You know, I'm always coaching vocals and that sort of thing. You know, it's not like I'm trying to tell her how to sing by any means to stretch imagination, but she didn't know the lyric, you know, so I pushed the talk back and said, well, I started singing the part where, you know, this is the right lyric here, da, da, da. She said, Keith, turn that machine on. I'm going to give you one take and that's it. That's all you're getting. And then that's what we got, you know.
Wow.
It's pretty funny.
Wow.
You're frozen.
Yeah, I mean, the 90s period was, I mean, you worked with some heavyweights, Regina Belle in 1995, the Reaching Back album. Also, Phil Perry's second album as well.
Yeah.
Deborah Cox in 1995 as well. You did a track on Deborah Cox with Diane Warren. 1997.
Love Deborah Cox.
Yeah. Puff Johnson in 1996. The late Puff Johnson.
Yep. Puff Johnson, right.
Please Help Me, I'm Falling, and the True Meaning of Love. Actually, the First Wives Club soundtrack as well. So Puff was on that. And then you actually did the song again in 2000 with Gladys Knight. The same song, Please Help Me.
Gladys Knight. Yeah, exactly.
So you were kind of on a roll with, you know, Deborah Cox, Puff Johnson, Regina Belle, 1999, Yolanda Adams. So
Tamia, did you? I got to work with Tamia as well, which was amazing.
Yeah. And what was the Luther Vandross track then? I didn't know the Luther.
What's that?
What was the Luther Vandross track?
Right. That was a greatest hits album.
Right. Okay, but then Tatiana Ali, Precious Wings, Elbow and Grouchland soundtrack. Yeah, and 98 Degrees from the Notting Hill soundtrack.
Right.
Yeah, so
that was fun.
The 90s were very busy period. Very busy period. Yeah, early 2000s, Jessica Simpson.
Right.
Yeah, and I even forgot Brian McKnight in 1997 with "Show Me the Way to Your Heart." With
love Brian McKnight. Yeah, good guy.
Diane Warren track, "Show Me the Way to Your Heart."
Right.
Yeah.
There was a period of time that all I was doing. There was a period of time that seemed like all I was doing was Diane Warren tracks. You know, it was like one after the other. It was funny.
Yeah. Well, you began the 90s with, I mean, one of your biggest hits in the 90s was Save the Best for Last with Vanessa Williams in early 1991. So I think from there, just, you know, the mainstream artists just started to roll. It was a good run. It was a very good run. And then early 2000s, Jessica Simpson, like I said. And then you anticipated the curve again when you started producing these Disney Hollywood record artists. So people like Savannah Alton, Celica Westbrook, Jordan Pruitt. Yeah, so it's like you anticipated the curve. You knew that would work, right? Because the whole changed. Yeah.
I think at that point, that's kind of when I started making the transition into management, you know, and trying to potentially have more say in the actual product coming out. And so I anticipated the whole video thing around 2007, I guess it was. So I outfitted, or 2006, I put cameras in the studio and lights and all that stuff staffed up that way, and seeing where everything was going to go, because I knew that eventually it was going to go to a visual format, and we're there, you know. And so, and I still do that right now, like like today, part of what I do is try to create the brand or help build a profile through the video and the media side of things.
Well, in the late 2009, 10, 11, 12, you started to come back with people like Heather Headley, which you won the Grammy for in 2009, Forever Jones, his second album, Chris Mann, Danny Goki. So you started to come back to that kind of adult contemporary Christian. You kind of, you know, Reese Palmer.
Wow.
So it's like you kind of came back, right, to that.
Yeah, and it's just funny because Danny Goki came by. I mean, Mitch Soleric is Danny's manager, and one Thanksgiving, he was on my list. I just sent him a happy Thanksgiving message, and he said, we need to reconnect because we had been friends before for a while. He said, I've got a new artist I want you to consider working with. So we connected there, and I worked on Danny's first album that he did with him, and another incredible human being. I love Danny Goki. I love everything that he's about. And that was a fun record. And then the people here this morning, we were just talking about that Christmas record that, we did. And that was such a great experience just to be able to, I love doing Christmas music. I'm a sucker for old school Christmas music, the classics. And Danny was on the road at the time. So I just made this record. He'd come in hoarse from being on the tour and then sing his vocal and go back out again.
Well, yeah, but Heather Headley stuff was incredible, and Forever Jones.
Well, another Heather Headley, another one of those I take a bullet for. And all of these guys, we became friends and family. You got Heather and Forever Jones. These guys stayed at my home. They lived with me for about a month while we made this record. So we cooked together, we laughed together, we had tornadoes here together. So it was, it was fun. And I'm talking about, it was like working with Winans again because they're all so talented. It was that same kind of thing, everybody in the family's got something special gift,
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, you've really got a lot of genres inside you. If we take something like I Love You from Behind the Eyes album by Amy Grant, 1997, really guitar driven, right? And then go into like the whole R&B. So if you listen to Just the Way from Forever Jones, that relentless Moog bass, and so you kind of, I mean, is there anything you would like a favorite like genre that you would you'd like to sit in, I guess?
Well, look, I not really. I love anything with a beat. I love and a great melody, but here's the thing, because I wanted to be an actor, I learned to get into the character, and that's kind of the way I approach these different artists. Is like, I look at it as like my theater teacher was like, she would have a stick on stage, and if you broke character, she'd whack you with it. It's like you don't break character, and so I had a scholarship to act. I had won governor's honors in junior and high school, junior senior year, and so it's one of those things where I still try to utilize some of those things I learned in theater, and I apply them to this. And so it's if I'm doing a country record, I mean, to me, it's funny because like when people hear I'm doing this Layla Tucker record, they don't know that I'm probably the most country guy here in Nashville because like I grew up that way, right? And the only reason I don't speak with that accent is because my theater teacher beat it out of me, So this is like coming home, doing Layla's record. It's like, it's old school country. It's what I grew up on. It's what I know. And so it's kind of fun to do that. But I assume that character, I assume that role. And I do that even with the urban stuff, and if somebody had a camera rolling in the studio when I'm working on some of this stuff, it would be pretty funny actually. But it's something I love anything that's done well. There's not a genre that I don't like I mean, if it's done well, I'm going to like it, but yeah. And my manager used to say, you're a freak of nature, because I would do 1 minute I'd have an urban artist in the studio, and then I'd have something that was totally like a classical thing in there, so it's interesting.
Yeah. So, and again, you've changed again, because I know you do a bit of photography, but I noticed you've been doing some stuff in India as well. I mean, that's interesting.
Yes. Oh man, you're talking about fascinating. I ended up, I have a partnership with Facebook with my partner, Lauriane Bloomfield. And we curate music internationally, and like we've delivered stuff from India, Japan, Africa, Middle East. But I was able to go to India twice, and I found a couple of people over there. I found one artist in particular that I just absolutely love, and we ended up shooting a music video with him. But I've met such incredible people over there, and I can't wait to go back. Obviously, when COVID's over, I'm going to go back and see them again. But I mean, I've got some great friendships there, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. And then what we're doing is we're trying to connect the world. We're trying to connect creators around the world. And some of our producers and writers here are actually writing with those guys there. And it's like just a great marriage, and everybody is so respectful of each other. It's been a fun process.
Cool. Anything coming out that we can purchase, download, or that? You know?
Well, like I said, we signed Layla Tucker to Concord Universal. She's on the Fantasy label there. And her project will probably come out in the spring, I'm guessing at this point, but we're doing a Merle Haggard tribute first. And hopefully COVID will be over and she'll be able to start touring next year. And then I'm working with a Canadian artist, Megan Nadine. We just really have been working together 6 to 8 months now. And her record, her EP is out. It's called This Was Then. It's Megan Nadine. She's from Canada. And just a lovely human being who really has a heart for other people and trying to help them. She has a passion for mental health. And so she's done a number of things about that. And she has a song called The Joker, which is her current single. But we're going to hit it hard in 2021 with her again and have a new single and video out with her as well come January, February.
Great. I know there's some of your discography that I missed out because there were some soundtracks there. And, you've got an extensive body of work. And I really appreciate the time that you've taken out to have this conversation with.
Oh, buddy. Well, thank you this is an honor to do this with you, because we've communicated back and forth for so long. And then, the fact that you're as knowledgeable about my career, probably more than I am, I find that that's humbling, and I appreciate it. It's just, you're a good man. Thank you for all the nice things you've said. I really do appreciate that.
Oh, no problem, Keith. So take care.
All right, buddy.
I hope you all have enjoyed the conversation just as much as I did. If you have, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.